Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt. On the radio, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on talklawradio.com. If you have a question you'd like for me to talk about, email me at host@talklawradio.com. That's HOST@talklawradio.com. We're here today with attorney Josh Hummer, who's telling us about his unique approach to estate planning called relational law. And we've just finished talking about estrangement and blended families, legacy letters, ethical wills. And now, Josh, since this is our last segment, we like to talk about legacy.
And now, it's time for the Talk Law Radio Legacy Spotlight. What's your legacy? Sponsored by Marquardt Law Firm.
Go ahead, Josh. What do you want us to know? Is there something special, family artifact, heirloom that you've inherited or that you're going to pass along? Or is there something more that you values that you want to leave those who are behind?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's something I spent a bit of time this past fall thinking about, and so I'll limit my answer to our team. I think we haven't really talked about elder law, Todd, but we certainly do that, and I know you do as well. And I think the more clients we interact with, the more we see how many people are dealing with estrangement or problems in their families or broken relationships, or they're in a difficult situation with an aging relative, or they themselves are aging and are worried about what the future has. And I think the other piece that we see as well is how poorly our culture is handling these people. And you just have to go to a Medicaid nursing home to have your heart broken by how people are being treated. And how many people have just been abandoned. And so and a couple of brief comments about that. I think it's very important that we value people for who they are, as the fact that they have value intrinsically rather than their value functionally.
Mm-hmm.
So just because someone is no longer able to do the things that they once were able to do does not mean they no longer have value. And I think that our culture needs to look at aging and death as an opportunity to serve and give and mentor on both sides, instead of looking at it as this thing to be avoided at all costs and never to be talked about, to see it for what it is, which is a tremendous opportunity. So that's our team's vision. So that's what the change we want to be a part of in the culture and in the world is changing our culture so that people view aging and death as an opportunity to love, serve, give, mentor, encourage, and bless others.
Wow.
And we think that's possible with a relational approach to these things. I'm not arrogant enough to think that I'm going to be the one to have any sort of part in that, but I certainly am hopeful that we will be able to do that, at least on a small scale, in the communities that we are involved in.
That's awesome.
So that's my passion, and I'm very excited about seeing what happens there. And then as one believer to another, Todd, the other thing I would share with you that's very encouraging to me among that regard is I see in my faith that God has a special place for widows and orphans. And I think many of our clients, even though they're not technically a young orphan, they may be an older orphan. So knowing that I'm aligning with what I believe my faith says is important and is an attribute of God is also very encouraging and exciting.
Thank you for mentioning that. I love that you view your practice that way and want to take care of widows and orphans. And I never really even thought that an elderly person could be an orphan as well. Let's talk about your elder law practice. What do you want us to know specifically besides wills and trusts and relational planning? Um, what are some ways that you serve them?
Yeah, that's probably another hour-long conversation there, but in very brief, we try and bring the golden rule into all of those relationships and or reflecting Christ or whatever that sort of mentality however you want to describe that, but basically in encouraging families to treat the aging relatives, members of their family well, to be thoughtful and intentional about engaging with them, to view them as having value. And then for the folks who are going through it themselves, to encourage them to be open and generous, not in a unwise manner, but to be wise in protecting themselves, but generous in looking for ways to give back and interact. And that is honestly still we're still in the beginning stages, I think, of understanding what that looks like, particularly when you throw in abuse situations and Medicaid planning and long-term care issues. There's just I know I'm preaching to the choir, Todd, but
Yeah.
it gets complicated. But the opportunities there are almost impossible to describe the scope of. There's just so many needy people, and so that's how we are beginning to think about it.
Okay. Now, when I talk about elder law, there's such a range of this is a practice area that is the only one that is described by the demographics of the person instead of the type of the law that's done. You
Yeah,
know, some elder law attorneys focus on age discrimination. For
yeah,
example, my practice, what I call elder law, would be helping people to qualify for nursing home Medicaid or to qualify for the Veterans Aid and Attendance benefit to help pay the cost of long term care.
yeah.
Other attorneys, personal injury attorneys, they say that they do elder law because they're out there trying to get a remedy for abuse or neglect of an elderly person. And
Yeah.
so there's such a broad range of elder law. Tell us what part do you focus on?
It's very similar to yours. It's we would say the planning aspects, so avoiding getting into a place where we need to have in Virginia, West Virginia, we call them guardians or conservators
Okay,
appointed,
right.
having rights removed, actually getting those rights removed if the plan is not set up, and then planning for long-term care. And then where we are, it's a financial plan. It's also a practical plan because um, you if you can plan well and look ahead and say we're going to need this type of care in a couple of years, not only can you frequently save money, but you can also get into a better facility um, with certain planning options. So
Okay.
and that's so it's all around that thing. We don't get into the abuse, and you're right, there are some personal injury attorneys who are doing great work, I think, at investigating some of those horrible scenarios. Um, I would say it also gets in a little bit with implementing plans for incapacity. For example, if their capacity has been reduced and we need to start restricting access to financial assets, we do get involved with that as well.
Right, and sometimes that's necessary. I have a whole seminar based on the obstacles for aging, and the number one obstacle to aging is fraud and exploitation. And so sometimes the way that you can protect your loved one is to disconnect the telephone.
It is, or change phone numbers, or we've done mail forwarding. You know,
Uh-huh.
we've done all sorts of things. And I, with slight momentary tangent, Todd, I get very frustrated with some of the nonprofits that are very aggressive about soliciting donations from some of our
My
clients.
uncle said the same thing of his mother and my grandmother. After she passed away, we found piles of letters from nonprofits that my grandmother had donated to. He thought that they were borderline predatory.
I would agree, and I wouldn't say it's a universal thing, but it is frequent, sadly.
Yeah. Some other questions that I wanted to ask you, we just have a couple of minutes left. Fair or equal? If you're dividing things up, this goes straight to the heart of relationships. Fair is not always equal, and equal is not always fair. How do you communicate that issue with your clients?
And again, probably needs a much longer discussion, but I'll just two things. One is it's what benefits them, right? So what is helpful to the person who is receiving the funds. That being said, sibling relationships are, and there's a study that just came out, Todd, that said sibling relationships are the most important relationships that people have as they age in terms of determining their well-being. So destroying a sibling relationship over money is almost never worth it. So we end up with fairness because that encourages sibling relationships if there are siblings. That being said, there are reasons not to do that. And if you're going to give money to someone who's made poor choices with money in the past, it's like giving alcohol to an alcoholic, right? You know they're going to use it to hurt themselves, and so you then I think that comes into it. But fairness doesn't, right? It's what is actually going to be good for the people receiving the funds, will be beneficial to them, is the ultimate.
If you have a blog that references that article about siblings, or if you write one, I will share it.
Okay. I don't yet. It's on the list to be written. So like you, I've got lots of ideas and very little time.
Well, I read a study one time about how siblings think that they grew up in the same family. The study said that's not true, because as you age and develop, your parents also age and develop, and all of the circumstances around the whole family, just like the butterfly effect, affects everything else. And so you can't really say you grew up with the same parents, because they treated you differently, they made different decisions. And so I'll give you 30 seconds to respond to that, and then I'll have to say goodbye.
No, I would agree with that. I would simply add that the emotional and relational connections involved in families are so powerful and so impactful. I think that is the value of a good estate plan, is making sure that you're preserving those and benefiting those as much as possible, and strongly encourage all of your listeners to consider doing that and work with a good attorney to help put together the legal piece.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. I have to say goodbye, but we can talk again off air sometime. I enjoyed getting to know you.
Likewise. Thanks, Todd.
Bye.
Bye.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com, and be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Each week, attorney Todd Marquardt talks about the law. His mission with the Talk Law Radio show and podcast is to help you discover your legal issue blind spots. In the beginning, God had one law: don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then came the 10 Commandments. Now we have federal, state, and municipal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws. Laws that might impact you without you knowing it. Listen to the show and drop a line on Facebook or email host@talklawradio.com and let the host know what you think of the show, the topics you want to hear, and whether you want to be a guest.